We continue now at the top of Daf Yomi in Meseches Nedarim. This is Nedarim Daf 85b. On the previous Amud, the Mishnah has a case where a wife says that which she produces is going to be usher to her husband through a neder, and the husband does not technically have to annul the neder because the wife is obligated. Her earnings go to her husband. But nevertheless, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri says the husband should annul that neder because they might get divorced in the future, and at that point in time, the neder will still be chal, and that which she produces will be forbidden to her husband. Let's say they want to remarry, that will pose a problem. So again, that's why Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri says the husband should annul the vow in that case. And Shmuel says the halacha is like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, and the Gemara concludes from that Shmuel and Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, they both hold that Adam makdish davar shelo bo liolam, that a person can sanctify something even though it does not yet exist, because here the neder is taking effect even on a future situation, on earnings that are on things that are going to be produced after the time of the divorce. So that indicates again Adam makdish davar shelo bo liolam. And the Gemara says that poses a contradiction for Shmuel, because there's a Mishnah in Ksubas, and the Mishnah in Ksubas talks about a situation where the husband says that the earnings of my wife, they're going to be hektish, they're going to be consecrated. So it's a similar situation over there, but instead of talking about a neder, where the wife is saying that her earnings and that which she produces is going to be forbidden to her husband, the husband is the one saying that the earnings and that which his wife produces, that is going to be hektish. And so the Mishnah says in such a situation, harezu osa v'ochelas, so she's still allowed to produce, and that which she produces she is allowed to eat, to consume. There's not a problem that her earnings are hektish. However, the Mishnah continues, v'hamoser, but let's say she earns beyond, she earns a little bit extra. Rabbi Meir Omer hektish, Rabbi Meir says that is hektish, that is consecrated. Rabbi Yochanan Sandler Omer chulin, and Rabbi Yochanan Sandler says it's chulin, it is not consecrated. And V'Omar Shmuel says, halacha Rabbi Yochanan Sandler, the halacha is like Rabbi Yochanan Sandler. And the Gemara assumes, Alma, we see from both Rabbi Yochanan Sandler and from Shmuel, that ein adam makdish davar shelo bo liolam, that a person is not able to sanctify something that does not yet exist, and that's why the moser, those extra earnings, are not going to be hektish. But again, that poses a contradiction for Shmuel, because here Shmuel seems to be implying ein adam makdish davar shelo bo liolam, and in the Mishnah, by paskening like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, he seems to imply that adam makdish davar shelo bo liolam. And the Mefarish explains harezu osa v'ochelas l'divrei hakol. So again, the first part of the Mishnah said that which she earns, talking not about the extra amount which she earns, but the regular amount which she earns. So that is going to be, she's allowed to consume that. That is not going to be hektish. And that, says the Mefarish, is l'divrei hakol. Again, it's according to everyone. V'yamrinan hasav Meseches Ksubas b'perek afapi. We explain over there in Meseches Ksubas, the v'she'ein ma'ala la mizonos kamayri. The case over there is that the husband is not providing sustenance for his wife. In situations where the husband provides sustenance for his wife, so then he really is entitled to the earnings. But let's say he's not providing sustenance, so then in that situation, really she is the one that's the owner over her earnings, and that's why he has no ability to be makdish. And so the Gemara over there says, well, if that's the case, so the fact that she can produce and she's able to consume that which she produces, pshita, isn't that obvious? Because if he's not even giving her any mizonos, of course she produces and she consumes. Of course it's not going to be hektish. And furthermore, what's she even going to be supported from if he's not giving her anything? Again, of course she'll be able to do that. And the Gemara over there says, "V'amrinan seifa itzricha leila misnei." So we say over there that you're right. The chiddush is not the base amount which she produces, which of course she'll be able to consume. The chiddush is the seifa which discusses the extra. And again, the Mefarish continues, "V'amoser Rimeir Omer hektish." So that extra she produces beyond what she requires. So that Rimeir says is hektish. Because Rimeir holds, "Avagav de Maisa Yodea Eino Yachol Hektish." Even though he's not able to sanctify her earnings, Hoav Eino Nizonis Mishalo, because she's not being supported from him. Mikol Makom Moser Al Mizonos. Nevertheless, that extra, let's say she produces more than she requires, Yachol Hektish, that he is able to be makdish, meaning to say Shehei Kadosh. Meaning to say, after she dies, that is going to be sanctified. Rabbi Yochanan Sandler Omer chulin, but Rabbi Yochanan Sandler says no, it's going to be chulin. Because Rabbi Yochanan Sandler says a person can't be makdish something that doesn't exist, that when it comes into existence, so then he's going to be makdish, it's not going to work. If you're talking about something that only is going to be his la'achar zman, meaning he's going to inherit that after a certain point in time, in this case after she dies, that's considered a davar shelo bo liolam, and therefore it is not going to be hektish. hektish. And again, v'yamar Shmuel Hasam halacha Rabbi Yochanan Sandler. Shmuel says over there the halacha is like Rabbi Yochanan Sandler. The tiknu la chachamim ma kesef tachas moser ma'isa yodeha. And the chachamim say that she's entitled to a ma kesef because she gives him the extra of her earnings. Di b'mala lo afilu b'chayeh shalohi. Point over here is if he was going to give her that if he's giving her that ma kesef, there's an exchange over there also. Just like by her regular earnings it goes to her husband in exchange for the mizonos, so to her extra earnings go to her husband in exchange for that ma kesef. That's the idea, because the point is, if he gave her that ma kesef, he actually would have total control over the extra earnings, and of course, even during her lifetime it would be his. But we're saying over there that it's only after her death that he really gets those extra earnings, because we're talking about a case where he's not giving her the ma kesef, so that's why it's only after her death. That's why it's a davar shelo bo liolam. And again, that's a machlokas tanoim. And Shmuel seems to say ein adam yachal hakdish davar shelo bo liolam v'kasha de Shmuel ad Shmuel, and that poses a contradiction within Shmuel. And the Gemara continues, V'chi teima. Now, if you're going to try to answer this contradiction of Shmuel by suggesting as follows, Ki ko'amar halacha Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, that what did Shmuel mean when he said the halacha is like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri? Al hadafahu dekamar, he meant the halacha is like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, but not for Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri's reason. In the Mishnah, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, he says that the reason why the husband should annul the vow, again, let's say the wife says that her earnings are forbidden to her husband, so Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri says the reason for the husband to annul the vow is because of those future earnings that might take place after there is a divorce. However, there was another reason given in the Mishnah for the same psak halacha, and that was the reason of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva held that let's say she has earnings and she produces extra earnings beyond the amount of sustenance, so Rabbi Akiva holds those extra earnings actually belong to the wife. And so the reason why the husband should annul the vow is because he wants to make sure he can still benefit from the hadafa, from the extra earnings that really belong to the wife. The neder is chal on the hadafa, and so therefore Rabbi Akiva says, annul the vow so that the neder should not be chal on the hadafa. And maybe that's really what Shmuel was saying. The reason to annul the vow is because of the hadafa, not because of the future earnings after the divorce. He was just saying the halacha is like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, that he should annul the vow, the husband should annul the vow, but not for the reason that Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri gave. But if that's the case, the Gemara says, so lema halacha Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri behadafa, he should say that explicitly. Shmuel should say the halacha is like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri because of the reason of hadafa, and that way not because of the reason of a future gerushin. Inami, or he should say halacha ketana kama, inami halacha Rabbi Akiva. Some change the gears over here. It should be inami halacha ein halacha ketanakama, or he should say the halacha is not like the Tanakama, or he should say inami halacha Rabbi Akiva, or he should say the halacha is like Rabbi Akiva. The point is, don't say the halacha is like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, because that's not really what Shmuel means. Clearly, if Shmuel says that the halacha is like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, he means the halacha is fully in line with Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, including the reasoning of Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, and so therefore again we still have this contradiction in Shmuel. And so the Gemara continues, Allah Amar of Yosef, rather of Yosef says, Shani konamos. By neder, by konamos, it's different. Hoel v'adam oser peiros chavero olav. Since a person is able, by neder in general, he can forbid the fruits of friend upon himself, meaning a neder is even able to be chal on someone else's property. So since that's the case by neder, that's a chiddush by neder, oser nami davar, shalo bali olam olav, so too, a person's able to forbid something that's not yet in the world. That's why it's possible for a wife, let's say, to forbid her earnings to her husband, even those future earnings that take place after the divorce, because a nedarim in general have a chiddush in that respect, that it can be chal on someone else's fruits, on someone else's property. So too on davar shelo bali olam. You can't compare that to the case of the Mishnah Ksubas, which is talking about making something hektish. That certainly would not work on something on a davar shelo bali olam, and that would resolve the contradiction in Shmuel. But the Gemara continues, Amar le Abaye, Abaye says to Rav Yosef, Bishlam Adam Oser Peiros Chavero Olav. No, I understand why a person is able to forbid the fruits of his friend upon himself. Sharei Adam Oser Peiros of Al Chavero, because the inverse also works. A person is able to forbid his own fruits on his friend, so he can forbid the fruits of his friend on himself. Eliyes or davar shelo bali olam al chavero, but is a person able to forbid something that doesn't yet exist on his friend? No, that's not the same thing. Sharei ein adam oser peiros chavero al chavero. For example, a person is not able to forbid the fruits of his friend on someone else, on his other friend. You can only prohibit the fruits of your friend on yourself. You can't prohibit the fruits of your friend on somebody else. And so therefore, a person likewise cannot forbid a davar shelo bali olam. It's no different than hektish. If you're not able to be makdish davar shelo bali olam, you can't create a neder on davar shelo bali olam as well. And the Gemara continues, Allah Amar Rav Huna B'Reid Rav Yoshua. Rather, Rav Huna B'Reid Rav Yoshua says, the case in our Mishnah is as follows, B'Omeres Yikdushu Yadai Li'osein. What the wife is saying is, she's saying, my hands should be kadosh for the work that it produces. And as the Gemara explains, Diadayim ha'isnu b'olam, that actually her hands are in the world. That's not a davar shelo b'oli olam. And Shmuel really says a person is not able to be makdish davar shelo b'oli olam. But in the case in the Mishnah, the reason why the neder is chal is because it's considered something that's b'oli olam, because she's really placing the sanctity or the prohibition upon her hands. But the Gemara says, V'chi amra hachi kadsha, but is that really true? Let's say she says this kidsha, is that really going to be sanctified? V'hameshabdan yadei labal, the neder shouldn't be chal, because her hands, again, are meshubed, there's an obligation she has to her husband, so it shouldn't be chal. And so the Gemara says, the amra lechi migrasha. No, what she says is, her hands will be sanctified or prohibited to her husband at the time of the divorce. At that time, it is under her control, and the neder can be chal. But the Gemara says that goes back to our original problem. Hashta miyas lo migrasha. Right now, there is no divorce. So therefore, how do you know that when she says that should work? Again, that goes back to the original problem, that it's a davar shelo b'oli olam. If she's only saying that her hands are prohibited after a certain point in time when she has control, meaning after the time of the divorce, that gets us back to the same contradiction in Shmuel, and we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Pei Vav Amud Aleph.